What's Your Work Fit is sponsored by Hudson Davis. Start your brand's marketing and communications journey today at hudsondaviscommunications.com. I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit? Thank you for joining us today on the live show. We are so happy to have you. We have viewers, I know, today from not just in North America, but around the globe. So thank you again for your support and viewership. It means the world to us. Now comes my ask, and that is, if you haven't done so already, please engage with What's Your Work Fit. We are on 3 platforms currently. LinkedIn, you can hit the follow button at What's Your Work Fit. You can find us on Facebook Live at What's Your Work Fit, and also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. Just hit those applicable buttons and you will be apprised of all new live shows and any other content that comes to the fore. One other ask that I want to make of you is this. If you like the experience that we are having here on What's Your Work Fit, please tell 5 of your friends to subscribe to us. That's how we're going to build a movement that makes work a wonderful part of a day, doing other wonderful things and not the all-consuming time suck of a day. Okay, let's get one other thing, and this is really important. The last live show that we did 2 weeks ago did get a little gummed up. Some of you were tuned in to watch Ram Srinivasan talk about what the workplace would be like in the year 2030, very AI influenced. We had some insurmountable technical difficulties, but the good news is we've figured out what they were, we've made corrections, and we're going to bring Ram back on our live show on Wednesday, June the 5th, 2024, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. So mark your calendar, and as we approach that show, we will put up new promotional material to announce that show. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to What's Your Work Fit, Corinne Murray, founder of Agate. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. So good to be here.
Good to see you. Good to have you on the live show. So let me tell you about Corinne. She is a workplace strategist and organizational transformation expert who helps companies to adapt and evolve in ever-changing business environments. And as you can see from her chyron there, she is the founder of Agate, which is a 2-year-old company. Terrible twos, Cam?
Terrible twos. We'll see what'll happen.
Well, your story is great. I love how you came up with the name. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But let's get to introduce our co-host today. First up, Mark Gilbreath. He is the founder and CEO of LiquidSpace. Mark, how are you?
I'm well. Hey, gang. Hey, Corinne.
Hi.
And of course, last but not least, Francis Saele, who comes to us today from Cincinnati and is a major presence on LinkedIn. If you are not following Fran, please do so. The stuff he writes about CRE, about future of work and workplace are must read. How you doing, Fran?
I'm great, Dan. Thank you very much, Corinne. Good to be with you today.
Likewise, Fran.
So today's question comes from the 3 of us, Corinne, and I'll get right to the point. We want to know, How will the fourth industrial revolution change work? So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the short answer is it really will change everything. There's many, many long ways to answer it too. I would say, there's actually a little bit of difference. I'm not sure whether it was 2011 or 2016. You and I have different information, so we can just call it even in the middle.
Yeah.
Let's call it 2013 and a half is when the fourth industrial revolution officially started. And that was based on what the World Economic Forum cited it as. And this deck does a great job. This slide does a great job of just saying it's really about the age of intelligence, integration of AI, machine learning, any form of automation that is really streamlining how business operates. And Klaus Schwab, the founder of World Economic Forum, who is mentioned right here, I found a quote from him around the time that they were announcing, or however you really announce industrial revolution. And he said, the changes of the fourth industrial revolution will be so profound that from the perspective of human history, there has never been a time of greater promise or potential peril. My concern, however, is that decision makers are too often caught in traditional, linear, and non-disruptive thinking, or too absorbed by immediate concerns to think strategically about the forces of disruption and innovation shaping our future. And to me, that is very eloquent way of tackling and just kind of viewing the fact that a lot of how the fourth industrial revolution is being discussed today is really through the media's approach to just business today. We're hearing a lot of stories around businesses doing exactly what he just was quoted saying, a lot of traditional, linear, and non-disruptive thinking around business. So how do we shrink our P&L? How do we shrink our bottom line? How do we create more profit with less effort or less materials and create more shareholder value? So all of this stuff is very cookie cutter from what we have seen business do for decades, maybe even generations. The fourth industrial revolution really, if we do it right, should upend that. And part of the reason why we are in this moment of, great promise and, potential peril is because it's more than just expansion. It is about genuine transformation. And that's something that the previous industrial revolutions really haven't dipped into entirely. So pulling all the way back to the late 1700s with the first industrial revolution, that was really about the shift from handmade or hand-produced goods to machine-produced goods. So shifting from, textiles that were hand woven versus ones that were made in textile factories.
Right.
Second industrial revolution is really where we, scaled up, and that became about mass production. So steel industries, the electrical industries, the automotive industries, all of those were the sectors that were really buoyed by the second industrial revolution. We'll talk about, you guys keep me honest, we will talk about the second industrial revolution more later, because our modern, and I'll say that slightly cynically, our modern understanding of productivity is actually rooted in the second industrial revolution, thanks to Frederick Taylor, who, right. Many people will remember Taylorism. Well, maybe not many. I'm a nerd. And scientific management, which was the first concept of management consulting. And all of those concepts got distilled down by Henry Ford onto the Ford factory floors into Fordism, which is probably the closest proxy to what we think about productivity today. And then the third industrial revolution, it was, the age of information, started in the late 40s, around the Second World War, and really stretched until about the dovetailing of the fourth industrial revolution. So we can look at it as, the computer boom through the 70s and 80s, this first real generation of Silicon Valley in the late 90s up through to the dot-com burst, and then all again through the 2010s to today.
Right.
So the fourth industrial revolution, really, there wasn't a big separation between the third industrial revolution, that age of information, and this age of intelligence, and this age of, IoT. So that's the timeline. That's how we've gotten to where we are. And you can see that through line of, it's been expansion, it's been growth, but it hasn't necessarily transformed.
Right.
Like, it's just been improving or streamlining and, being more efficient in how we do the things rather than transforming the things that we do, full stop.
Okay, Mark, lead us off.
I mean, as a
Where do you want to start?
I mean, as a student of history, like economic revolutions, industrial revolutions, I mean, they're exciting on reflection because these were the periods where a lot of change happened. Everything was up for grabs. A lot of layers of society and economy and culture and religion, even government, they get reformed or undone. And so it's all up for play. And I think our collective obligation is to honor that moment in time and put it back together in a better way. Better for people, better for the planet, better for the economy, right? So into one little corner of putting it all back together better, work and workplace. I mean, Corinne, you're deep on those principles and you're working with clients on that. Have you yet seen that the template, is hybrid work putting it back together correctly? You've even posited that hybrid is broken, or for a lot of people, the broken hybrid is sort of what they found themselves with.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a better way of saying it. Like, the way that a lot of people learned how to work flexibly and work remotely was in 2020 under duress. And just based on that, like, that means that we weren't learning at our best. We had a global pandemic. There were parents who became, second grade teachers. There were, kids who became caretakers to their elderly parents, fill in the gap of all these different things. And this is specific to the very privileged knowledge worker sect. We have to be really careful when we talk about this stuff because there are always going to be frontline workers, service workers who don't necessarily get to reap the same specific benefits of flexibility and remote work. But in this case of knowledge workers, we just kind of picked up all these bad habits and we did them without any form of regulation because of the company. Everyone was doing it. Executives were learning at the same time as the people. And so there wasn't a lot of airtime for folks to really shape these programs.
Survival rather than intentionality driven.
That is exactly right. And so it takes a lot of undoing the bad habits to create group habits, because I think our biggest challenge right now is that we have millions and millions of people who have created individual habits from 2020 and have, tweaked them here and there.
Right.
But there's no cohesive narrative of how does my team operate together in a flexible or a hybrid or distributed, whatever adjective you use, in that kind of way. And part of that is because companies are trying to solve the wrong problems. And that's where we are seeing return to office, go through whatever the 6th or 7th death rattle that it's gone through. There's that, sort of red herring focus. And also there aren't that many companies that are taking a strong stance and saying, this is what we believe in. Go ahead.
Can you say a little bit more about companies solving the wrong problems? In our world, I think we talk about that a lot, but to the lay observer, I don't know that that's so well appreciated. So preach to us a bit on that, if you would.
Absolutely. So I believe that return to office in general is one of those wrong problems to solve, because the core learning from 2020, which we can call, oh, hi, Ani, what we can call the great work from home experiment, is work travels with the knowledge worker. So that means wherever we have Wi-Fi, wherever we have power, our work is with us. And that's the knowledge that I think is continuing to create the resistance from most employees, is that like that's the key learning. They learned that work doesn't only have to happen in the office building that they commute to consistently. So that's the biggest rigidity. What companies could solve, instead of, I want you back in the office 3 or 4 days a week because that's just how we operationally feel better, is to come at it from the angle of, you want these things, but we value these things. How can we negotiate something in the middle that we know is measurably beneficial for you to come into the office for? So that is socialization with your colleagues, creating programming that doesn't just have you sitting at desks or is sitting in meetings, and really like building that connective tissue back up, because that is one thing that really severely atrophied in 2020 and still has carried through to today. So return to office is not a bad idea. The application and the focus of only getting butts in seats is the wrong approach. Right. Return to office for specific reasons that will benefit the individual and also benefit the team and the organization. That's what companies need to be repositioning those efforts around.
Fran?
Yeah, this is really an interesting area, Corinne. And it seems to me that this particular phase, this fourth revolution, gets us into the weeds of how people actually do individual work.
Yeah.
If we're going to digitize how people work, I mean, in the old days, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
I call them the before times.
Yeah, you would have a job now, and you have a process manual maybe, and it would sort of say you do this, this, and this. But it didn't get into the nitty-gritty detail of exactly how you did these processes.
Yeah.
Today, digital workflows are available widely. I don't think there's implemented that much, frankly, but they're coming for sure.
Yeah.
And once you have a digital workflow and you're integrated across a number of other participants, whether they're with you or wherever they are around the world, you're going to see a lot more. A manager is going to see a lot more. The organization is going to know a lot more about every individual employee, how they work, how the teams work, what's working, what isn't working, et cetera. It goes on and on and on.
Totally.
That's a fundamentally different position to be in versus any of the previous revolutions.
Absolutely.
How should employees deal with that, and how should managers deal with that issue as it comes up?
It's a good question. I think so. There's a couple of things. I think the immediate response from most employees is to feel protectionist and to be fearful of that kind of transparency. Partly because there's companies really struggle to scope jobs very well. And so, there's always a fear of, well, if I'm not creating enough legitimacy for myself in the work that I do, how do I still demonstrate my value if I have only a small scope of work? So there's a lot of HR and organizational issues around that, of how do we really articulate who is doing what, why they're doing it, where it fits in the greater scope of the organization and the organizational goals. So that way, ultimately, you are right. This will be a big win and something that employees should feel excited about, because they get to know exactly what's expected of them. And I'd actually seen one of the comments prior on LinkedIn, someone talking about the difference between full-time employees and solopreneurship. Yeah. I do think that that kind of transparency and structure can create a lot of opportunity, because then we're focusing on outputs. We're focusing on, this is the job that you are being asked to do, rather than, we're going to hire you for this. This is the job description, but you're going to have other special projects and all these things that are, slightly, they're under the water line, essentially. So this is the long way of getting around to, I think employees should welcome it, but they should welcome it in the way that it's a tool for them to be really, really specific about the work that they do. There's through the past couple of years, there have been a lot of new terms thrown around, like the passion tax, or things that basically, like, if someone is so invested in the kind of work that they're doing or the brand that they're working for, there can be this level of taking advantage, exploiting, which is a very common theme through industrial revolutions, is the exploitation of resources. There can be that invisible tax of, we know you're so into this, and so here we're going to give you more without necessarily the commensurate pay that goes with it. Right. So I do think that there's the transparency has benefit going both ways. Organizations will get to see what tasks are happening on the individual and team level, where and how people do it most effectively, and how they can support it best, or where they might need to intercede, and whether it's a PIP or things like that. They can come in and help individuals or teams. And then on the individual side, they can say, okay, this scope of work is commensurate to this type of pay that I'm receiving. Any additions or any changes in those things, I get to then have information that I can go to the HR team or the team that's hired me and discuss compensation. So I think the long run is a reality that looks like that is more transactional. But I do think that we have a lot of digital transformation and also employee mistrust of organizations and vice versa that we'll need to sort through first.
Right. And that could get worse when we have another new factor. For the first time, we have AI. Kind of like Darth Vader is out there.
Yeah.
Okay? Has all this data. It's going to be looking at all this data. It's going to say, hey, we're doing this, this, and this. But you know what? If we did this, this, and this, we would make more money, or we could use less people, or we could that's out there, and that's really not controlable, and that hasn't really happened yet. It's only going to be a couple of years at least before
we're still in the very early stages of that.
How do we do
it? Would it be overly dramatic to expect that the level of change in the fundamental work to be done when you introduce AI and other robotic automation opportunities into the mix is like perhaps equivalently profound to the pre-industrial revolution, which was the agricultural revolution, where we shifted from
foraging to
foraging, hunting, gathering to
that's actually a
agriculture, and there everything changing was city states emerged, and we could store energy, and we didn't have to go chase the food. We grow the food, and so work changed. like the skills needed were radically different than what was vital to survive as foragers.
Thank you for that comparison. I think that is probably the most appropriate comparison to the fourth industrial revolution, because it's not iteration. It is just full stop. We are doing something different. So yes, I do think that the tasks that people do are going to change. I am not enough of an AI expert to say, oh, this is what's going to change, and this is the timeline horizon on when that'll happen. But I was reading something a couple of days ago that I can't remember where it was from, but Eric Kerr was the person who gave it to me. The author, I'll send it to you, Dan, so we can put it in the show notes. But the article really was about knowledge work is going to transform into something like curation. Eventually it'll get to this point where the whatever version of the tools will be operating in such a way that the only skill, or one of the few major skills left to do, would be what lives together and why.
So the mixing table of work. Like I don't create vibrations and audio notes. Rather, I'm just mixing and remixing, and I move up an abstraction layer.
So all these like creating the different ratios and different compositions of these things is a likely future state for what knowledge work might look like. So that part is not my direct expertise, but I really thought that the concept of curation was a really fascinating one. And I would say in late 2021, late 2022, maybe around the time that ChatGPT was coming out, there was this boon of articles about a liberal arts education is going to be the most durable thing in the age of intelligence. I happen to have a religious philosophy degree from a liberal arts school in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So I had a little feather in my cap reading those, but it makes sense because, you know, what's being asked of that work and what's asked of any student who's, you know, pursued liberal arts in any way is context. And context isn't something that's necessarily taught. That's something that you just acquire. I don't know if that is something that eventually AI will be capable of. Again, that part's above my pay grade, but it just really interesting sort of connections to, you know, why these skills are being pointed out as relevant in the future.
Dan, may I follow on that?
Sure.
Corinne, if context is so important, and I totally agree on, by the way, on the power of liberal arts education. Back down in this narrower little section of work and workplace and the reprogramming workplace. You know, you said in a correspondence with me in the past, you know, workplace is an organizational problem, not a real estate one.
Correct.
Yet the primary executors of the workplace transformations that are underway are the corporate real estate departments. Yeah. The very same individuals that were, you know, in charge of creating place. They were signing leases. They were the shovels in the ground and the property management, the facilities management, you know, staff.
That's the way it used to be. Yes. And
And do they have adequate context? If it's an organizational problem, do they have adequate context? Are we headed toward a wall or a train wreck? Do we have the right people in the kitchen prepping the meal?
No, we don't. I think we don't have the right people in the kitchen doing the right tasks. This is not like, you know, real estate within an organization's function will always be important. How that manifests, whether they're working with someone like you, Mark, and you know, approaching real estate from a more marketplace strategy, or they're going a more traditional route, or they're remote first, there will always be a built environment, physical environment strategy that goes into their workplace. But that's not they are not the, you know, they're not the executive chef. They're, you know, they're one of the prep chefs, and that's okay. Like, you know, that is not to degrade what happens. I come from that world. That world is part of how I know as much as I do. Yes, workplaces versus workspaces, Chris. Yes, thank you. It is an important ingredient in this mixture. So to kind of call back to just what we were talking about with curation and context, real estate is part of the context, but it's not the only one. You know, we need to think about what the digital environment looks like and feels like. We need to think about the experiential environment, and that's not just hospitality. That's, you know, that's policy, that's executive style and executive strategy, you know, all the invisible, intangible things that really shape what a company is. That all those three things together make up the three-legged stool of what workplace really is.
The three-legged stool. And I learned about the passion tax. I'm going to start hashtagging that on LinkedIn. So Corinne, we got a few viewer questions, and thank you guys for sending these to me early. I really appreciate it. I want to get to Ed first. The questions I'm going to ask you in this round are about education, training, accreditation, all that fun stuff. So Ed says pretty soon the cost to attend a top college university will surpass $90,000 a year. Okay, no question about that. Meantime, more new careers are going the career and technical education path. And Ed is asking, how will the fourth industrial revolution change education for careerists? What are your thoughts?
That's a very good question. And thank you for breaking down CTE, because that was going to take me a minute. I think, well, there's a couple of different angles. I think there's already been a large conversation about how AI and just, you know, the advancement of tech alone will transform education. You know, just creating learning programs that are more customized to someone's strengths, someone's abilities, all that kind of stuff. So that is one area that has the potential to leapfrog the traditional higher ed structure. What it might do for the CTE tracks. I honestly don't know if I know enough to have an answer, but an educated guess would be it makes it more accessible.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that we are learning, for anyone who's really paying attention to what late stage capitalism means in day-to-day life, the things that are cheap are like the televisions and the goods, but the services are still expensive. So the
Mhm.
things that still require humans. I don't know why, but I keep hearing about like we don't have enough plumbers. Thankfully,
Right.
that's not been something I have needed to be directly influenced by recently. But it's if ever we have robots for plumbing, we've got a long way to go before that happens. So I do actually think that there trade work it will have an insurgence, and that I think is a really I think that's a really positive opportunity. And I am a nerd. I had the privilege of going to a very like a top-rated college, and think and be the nerd that I am. But all of this stuff, and I think Mark, this ties back to like how do we get back to righting the ship, Skipper, is being in community, like being of service to people in a direct one-to-one way, in a way that most of the companies that we work for, there's always some sort of veil or 2 or 3 step process that actually divorces most of us from the customer. And this is not to say like someone who is a head of real estate doesn't have direct customers of their employees. I'm talking more about the companies themselves. So the company as an entity interacting with people. So my long shot optimism for the fourth industrial revolution is that work does change completely. The concept of how we work today does become a thing of the past, because I don't think that we've been going down a healthy route. We have education is what it is because it's become so much of a status symbol, and the status symbol is so required to get into these prestigious companies and institutions to then create more wealth and so on and so forth. I believe when we are able to, when we are forced to reckon with what that means as companies begin to create downsize their headcounts because they can automate so much, certain level, low level, mid level, whatever kinds of work, where do people go? Teaching, nursing, doctor, being a doctor, being a tradesperson. I do think that there is some sort of we have a chance of like some sort of 360 arrival there. Whether it gets uglier before that happens, that's up for grabs.
Yeah.
But part of where I think my work fits in is how do we adapt to what's on the horizon? And that's really where that productivity stuff that I was mentioning before comes in.
I want to get to a couple others and then we'll get back to Mark. So first from JP. JP is a project management professional, PMP. It's a term I don't hear a lot on LinkedIn about, but I really should, because so much of our workplace is about projects and outcomes and things like this. And he's asking, what is Corinne's sense of how the fourth industrial revolution will change the scope and importance of project management? Great question, JP.
I think work will become more project-based, at least in terms of human interface, because we will get to this point again where technology is able to run at a pace and in a way that doesn't require as much maintenance as we understand today.
Right.
So when people need to be engaged, I believe it will be in sprints. So it might not be an 18 or 24 month project anymore. It might be a 9-month project. So the function of a PMP might change, or might stay the same. However, I think just the responsibility becomes truncated, and the dependencies, or like who they're managing, who they're keeping accountable, it might just be a smaller crew because you don't need as many hands on keyboards as we do today.
Interesting. Interesting. I want to get to Khaled's question. Khaled sent this in 2 days early because today's Eid, so he's not online today. Thank you, Khaled. I know you'll enjoy the playback. Khaled asks, what does the fourth industrial revolution do to the clock? What a great question. That we're all slaves to the clock. Does it break it? I love this. What do you think?
Happy Eid, Khalid. I love this. I think in some way it does. Mm-hmm. It might not. Well, it breaks something. Mm-hmm. Again, someone said this in the comments earlier, and thank you, because I was already sort of thinking this way, but it really clarified how I wanted to talk about it, was about the extractive methods that are tied to industrialism and to capitalism.
Right.
Those are they are part and parcel, because that's just how the model works. The resources that are being squelched for knowledge workers, again, specifically, are our time, our energy, and our labor. So the clock might not be breaking, but our need to maximize the clock, maximize what is available in every turn of the clock, I think is what will be changing. So part of that is today people can optimize their own processes. There are enough tools out there that help people streamline their individual work. Companies are determining how that can happen at the organizational scale. We're starting to see how that's going to take shape. Eventually, we will start to see that downslope of headcounts. What that then means, hopefully, fingers crossed for all the lefties like me, we will have some form of universal base income, which I don't see a way that survives unless we just decide we want to go into more and more war. More unemployment tends to lead to more war. So, Anyway.
Listen, fellow traveler, I learned about Max Weber from a Marxist-Leninist professor.
Yeah.
He's long past, and I've got to wonder what Montana Morton would think of the fourth industrial revolution. It would make her head explode.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, you take it away.
When I was a kid, we had the Game of Life. One
of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a good game, right? So if we liken that this industrial revolution is just like a reset of a game board.
Yeah.
And if AI is maybe one of the new environmental conditions that exists in this period, when the path through the game board is being rewritten, the last 2 or 3 industrial revolutions that you kind of chronicled at the opening of the call, and you described them as sort of being evolutionary. Mm-hmm. They all had the through line of those was they were increasing. They were driven, shaped and driven by capitalistic forces, and yes. They were increasingly efficient, and some might say exploitive of resources, the planet.
Yep.
Resources, people.
Yep.
So the game board's been shaken again, and it's like a snow globe, and it's resettling, and we have the opportunity to. I mean, there's a gift and also a terror here. Like, is the resettling going to be just the latest next, squeezing on the lemon or of the towel and getting even more economic juice out, or might other considerations be brought into play and honored as we reorganize? So the interest of people, like the lived experience, yep. And maybe the interest of the planet, which has not been given any attention through the last 3 industrial revolutions, to our great peril. Nope. So what's the conversation that needs to happen, or maybe beyond conversation? What do we need to make sure is in the kitchen, to ensure that consideration of Mother Planet, consideration of the lived experience, actually are given near equal kind of governance? In the making of the soup.
Right.
Sorry for the tortured metaphor.
I love it. I have also talked about this kind of stuff as a stew. So I love hearing it from other people. So you're absolutely right. The past industrial revolutions, even including this one, have been the opposite of friendly to the earth that we live on, and most of the labor that it requires. We can look to a lot of places that are very natural resource rich and see just how marginalized and poor those communities tend to be. So there's a lot of really big macro stuff that gets influenced by this. In terms of the game board being shaken up, though, I actually don't know if I think the better way to think about the fourth industrial revolution is that the game board is still set. Like the fourth industrial revolution, I think actually requires the game board to stay stable. I believe that for the fourth industrial revolution to do what it can do to support ourselves, to support our planet, and to, return to what is more of a beneficial order for as many people as possible, is to be that we are the ones who need to shake the things up. And there are a couple of things we have a couple of guide points to start with. Europe is always further ahead on us on these kinds of things, but the right to unplug, and these are all like the microscopic value of these things in the full scope of what we are really going to be dealing with does sometimes seem laughable, but we need to think about this in a 1% better mindset. One of the things that I've learned through my career is as cool as just like, drop the bomb kind of change can be, of like, we are thinking about something top to bottom and just boom, one day it's going to be here. It doesn't stick because it doesn't create buy-in. It like there's anyone who's done org transformation has been through this of like, it's glossy and it's awesome. And it has this speed. I was talking about this with Chris Mahler the other day, speed versus velocity. It doesn't always have the direction that really lands on what the impact is on the day-to-day. So it kind of stays up in the ether rather than being grounded in reality. So approaching things from this 1% better of right to unplug, 4-day or 32-hour work weeks, both of which were recently introduced as legislation in the US. I think anyone who pays attention to politics knows the likelihood of those passing anytime soon is quite slim, but it is in the conversation. And that I think is a really, really important turning point that gets this on the minds of people thinking about what that means, what that actually looks like. So long before we get to this, like, okay, we have all of this time on our hands because AI is doing so much of the work that we used to do, we ourselves need to reorient ourselves. We need to train ourselves into a new reality. Otherwise, we are always going to just be like Hoover vacuums looking for more work to do. We need to reposition ourselves. We need to reposition ourselves toward making the changes for ourselves. How do we use that extra time? What do we use that towards? Is it, climate action? Is it community action? Is it building your family? Whatever that might be, but using the time for yourself rather than just to find things to keep yourself busy.
We're running a little short on time. I want to get to Fran.
Sorry, I'm
and then no, you're doing great. Fran, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Corinne, one of the things we talked about earlier was the fact that the fourth revolution is really into the underwear of people. In effect, it really touches them in a different way than the others have. The other thing about it that's unique.
We're a family show here, Fran.
Yes, I know. is that the speed with which this revolution is occurring is different than any other. And if you go back to the first one, it was decades. Then it was years. Then it was, I don't know what the third one was, but it was, again, years.
Yep.
Now, and I just point to, and we talked, Dan talked earlier about Ram Srinivasan, who was doing this AI discussion. It puts out a lot of material about what his expectation is on AI in terms of being deliverable and usable. And I recall him coming out recently with the fact that some of the things that he expected to take a year have taken 2 months. And that the schedule is just compressing so quickly that the level of change is almost exponential.
Yes.
So that when you think about what are we going to do when we have more time? Well, I don't know if we're going to have time to think about that, frankly. But this is another change that is very difficult, I think, for people to get used to. And it creates an uncertainty and a discomfort about where we're going. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. It is one of those, like, it's the coin of like, you can look at it from there is plenty to be concerned about because of just this unyielding pace of change and not being able to wrap your head around where things might be at a certain time.
Right.
What works for me is kind of taking the other complete route of knowing that those things exist. Those are AI in general is just, I know that it's kind of just like there. I know it exists. I know that it is changing so much quicker than I can wrap my head around as a consumer. And so I dip in when I need to. I use it. It is a resource for me when I need it, but it has really, Rob took the words out of my mouth. We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because on the other side of that discomfort is, I think, where we find something that is much more meaningful and does get into the caring for ourselves in a communal stance, rather than needing to just continue pursuing just to break even. We like this also kind of ties back to what Khalid's question was, which is, that I think is more of the thing that breaks it, less about the clock and more about this concept of this is the only track we have. And
right.
Like, that, to me, that's the biggest transformation. And that's entirely personal. Like that's not something that we can push someone into, but pieces of these legislations, helping people figure out how to be effective instead of productive, which is really just like, what are the environmental, and not just like earth environmental, what are the cultural variances of a company? What resources are you offered to make you your most productive? All of these, figuring out all these things so that you can streamline yourself in advance. So we basically want to create an off-ramp for ourselves in many ways. And how do we gently extract ourselves from this, hyperloop roller coaster, and figure out, without completely going into the deep end, without our swimmies on, what
floaties,
what does, what matters to us? How do we reconnect to ourselves, our community, our family, the earth? And a lot of us haven't been taught that. And again, this goes to a lot of macro, indigenous stuff that, I think is becoming more and more amplified, because it's kind of like, oh, maybe we should have been listening to them all along.
So perhaps managers should be thinking more about mental health today.
Yeah,
than they needed.
Managers should be thinking so much more about mental health, and not just take a mental health day or here's a wellness day.
Right.
They should be thinking about how do we alleviate the persistent load on teams, on individuals. And that's where we granularly get to, like, hey, maybe we should stop having so many meetings.
Right.
Why are we having these meetings? What value, what measurable value is coming out of these meetings? So for me, and again, like, I stare at this stuff and think about this stuff at, microscopic level. There is a through line between thinking about return to office, the future of work, thinking about like, what is healthy meeting culture, effectiveness and productivity, all the way into what is this paradigm that is on that other side of that discomfort that we're worried about confronting.
I hope you're right. And I hope that humanity in general and mental health specifically are suffused to the dialogue that we have ongoing about the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
Corinne, this has been a lot of fun. And I knew we were going to run out of time, because the three of us probably have like 8 hours worth of questions to ask you. So I hope we can get you back on sometime.
I'd love
to. She gets a jacket this time.
I do get
the jacket, the 2-timer jacket. Yeah. So we want to get you back. But before I get to the final question for you, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find you on social media and how they may get in contact with you.
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Name is spelled with 1 R and 2 N's. The only 2 R's in my name are in the Murray. My website is agate.studio. And I author the Substack, The Workplace Strategist. It's where I talk a lot about, what is the future of work? How do we rethink a lot of these things? So if you'd love to hear me ramble and just, postulate about a lot of this stuff, please come join me there. I'm likely going to do a write-up about this conversation too. So would love your thoughts and comments on that. And keep an eye out for a book that I am co-writing with Sarah Escobar coming later this year called Work Then Place, Navigating the Future of Work and Where It Happens.
Congratulations. So for those of you who are not familiar with Corinne, she is an absolute joy and she writes like Dorothy Parker.
Ooh, thank you so much.
She's just this wit and just fun, and you take what is often very dry material and make it really enjoyable. So thank you for that. Let's get to our final question, which is, what's your work fit? Now, you answered this question for us some time ago, actually last year. So just to remind you, I'm going to ask you to listen to what you said, how you answered this question, and then offer any amendments to it. We asked you, what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful, meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? So going back to episode 211, here we go.
My work fit definitely does vary by the day. And it depends on the work that I'm doing. If I'm sitting on my computer and I have meetings, what you see is exactly what I get to experience. And I am very space sensitive, which isn't that surprising for someone who's worked in and around real estate for nearly 15 years. But also I do need that balance. And, I am an entrepreneur. My office is, my office address is my home address. And so being really diligent about getting out into the world just to have like ambient people time is really, really critical. So, to what Diane was saying with her young students who are now in the working world, I'm not a full believer that remote in that you are alone all the time is not the fit for anyone. You need to find that balance. And I live in Brooklyn. I have all these wonderful things that are just outside my door. And I've cut out a nice little slice of it for myself.
What's changed?
I look so cute and sweet. I'm like, oh wow, so much has happened in 1 year. Anyway, I would say I ascribe to all of that. The work fit has mostly stayed the same. The one amendment I would add to it is on the experience side. I think what has clarified for me since then and has really deepened for me is the work that I do isn't evolutionary. It does not follow that model of improving and tweaking. It lives in transformation. And I do feel like, whether we're talking about it through the context of the future of work or the fourth industrial revolution or, fill in the blank crisis that we are dealing with at the moment. I feel that the work that I do and what I care about doing is about helping people figure out where they fit in it, so that that way they can just start from where they are and take those steps toward that discomfort and really embodying that action. Because I do think that the fourth industrial revolution is ultimately going to be about us if we make the right moves.
The cool part about your answer is you refer to Diane, which is Professor Diane Gajewski, who you know.
Yes.
Diane's the former dean of the Park School of Communications at Ithaca College, my alma mater. She's also one of the leading authorities on EX, or employee experience, which is something you know a lot about.
Yes.
So that EX is something that I think we can certainly pick up again when you come back.
Absolutely.
Later on this year. Corinne, gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. Corinne, don't go away. Fran's going to wheel in the beverage cart So we have virtual teenies coming up. So stick around. We'll finish off with you offline.
Amazing.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Great show.
Thank you
We
for all the
will-
great questions.
Yes, indeed. We will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.